Story 1. The satisfaction of repairing something yourself is incredible. When you have no other choice, it's amazing what you can accomplish. Story 2. They don't know what being poor means. I keep trying to tell my friend she was never poor. Your dad buys you a brand new Acura for your 16th birthday. You are not poor because you asked for a Mercedes instead. Also, the butter knife is the most universal tool. Story 3. What actual hunger is. They do not understand that kind of hunger. The one where you are hungry but there is no food in the pantry and no money for it. It is hunger not by choice and it changes you profoundly. Story 4. Health is a commodity. I don't just mean being able to afford to see a doctor or pay for prescriptions. Clean water, a home's climate, dangerously warm, cold, or humid, bedding that allows for meaningful rest, food that is nutritious, weather-appropriate clothing, footwear that protects against frostbite and hookworms. It is expensive to maintain what people consider to be baseline health. And that is before considering medicine and healthcare. Story 5. I only ever had one pillow, and it was never replaced. I was well into adulthood before I allowed myself to purchase a second pillow. The luxury of replacing my pillows every few years and having more than one has never become old. There are many other things I did without as a kid that I have never reached the point of considering normal. It always feels excessive or like I am being extra to have these luxuries. Story 6. It taught me self-reliance and to be grateful for having enough. Having anything extra made me feel guilty for a long time. Story 7. I remember getting free lunches, which wasn't bad because most kids' parents gave their child a check at the start of the year to put into their account. So, most kids didn't hand over money during lunch, which meant I could blend in. What was bad was when, for some reason, I had 25-cent lunches one year. I guess there was a sliding scale of income to lunch paying ratio. I would get a $5 or $10 bill to add to my account from my parents, which always looked funny giving to the lunch lady since, for a normal kid, that wouldn't last a week. And then, God forbid, my account was out, and the lunch lady would either front me a quarter or call it out. I learned to be very careful about what was on my account and when I owed money because I didn't want to be around my friends in line when it happened. Such a silly thing for a kid to have to think about, but probably was one of the many first instances of money anxiety and why I probably consistently check my financial accounts. Anyway, make all public school lunches free. Story 8. Being poor and the constant worry affect your physical health. You actually get sick from worrying. Also, some people are so poor they cannot afford a job. How? A low-paying job means you lose your government benefits sometimes. So you cannot afford to put your kids in daycare while you go to work. Transportation, clothes to wear to work, and so on. Medical bills start with a toothache you cannot take care of, which ends up needing a root canal. 2 years of untreated back pain may lead to needing surgery. The list never ends. Story 9. Work ethic. I can only rely on myself for the things I need and want. I am going to have to work for it. Nobody is going to just give it to me. Story 10. Without money, some consequences hurt a lot more, such as traffic tickets, making a mistake on a purchase, missing a bill payment, and so on. Story 11. Wealthy children do not fear failure. They take risks with their jobs and careers that individuals who grew up in poverty cannot or will not take. Story 12. How much stuff do you really not need? For example, plastic containers. Just reuse the plastic you get from the items you buy. Story 13. The misery of wearing secondhand clothes. I understood there was no money for new clothes, but inside it really burned, and it punched my self-esteem in the stomach. Story 14. Started childhood poor, ended childhood rich. I remember good intentions Christmases. I remember being told not to eat so much. I remember growing produce because it was too expensive to buy. I remember being asked if I really felt sick enough for the doctor. I remember wishing I could go on vacation. I remember broken everything and secondhand everything. I remember being ashamed of it. I swore my children would never know that feeling. Fast forward 9 years and my dad has been succeeding in his career and made it to executive. I remember lavish gifts for me as my parents overcompensated in our brand new house in the brand new wealthy neighborhood with good schools. I remember my first car being brand new, and friends who got new BMWs and new Porsches for their first cars at 16. I remember the moment my mom told me we didn't have to worry anymore. I remember when I started to forget what it was like to not have things and judging people. I remember being ashamed of it. I swore not to forget. My kids will never have a good intentions Christmas. Story 15. Foraging for food in the woods involves knowing where the berry bushes are and which parts of plants are edible. Story 16. Patience. Saving a little money each week until I can buy a big item, instead of just buying it when I need it. Story 17. Nothing is ever given. One year, as kids, my siblings and I had no toys for Christmas. Our parents did their best, but it just didn't work out for us on the big day. The Boy Scouts came to our house on Christmas Eve and gave us presents. I was so happy to receive a low-quality basketball under the tree. It meant the world to me because somebody gave me something, and it felt like I mattered. So, this Christmas, go to a store or mall, take a tag off the tree for an angel gift, and make a child's entire Christmas with your donation. It really does make a difference. Story 18. I still live like a poor person in many ways. I never make large impulse purchases. Ever. Even if it is within my budget, I take my time and really consider what else I could do with that money before making a final decision. I am a bargain grocery shopper and never spend more than I need to on healthy, fresh food. I only buy clothes I know I am going to wear and only replace them when needed. No matter how much money I have, I will never throw it away by buying a brand name or designer item. I only drive practical Toyotas and Hondas, and I drive my cars into the ground before replacing them. Growing up in poverty and spending most of my life poor caused me to have a permanent what-if anxiety about money. I am constantly running through scenarios in which an unexpected expense could arise or, God forbid, several all at once. It has made me very cautious with spending. I also always have money reserved to share if someone I know has an emergency, and I am generous with it. I know what it is like. My husband definitely did not grow up rich, but his family did not struggle like mine. He is not one to waste money or buy unnecessary luxury items, but he is definitely more relaxed about spending than I am. Story 19. My dad always made a point to say things like, "It's expensive to be lazy," which meant that if something like a noise in your car happened, you should fix it immediately. Otherwise, a small issue like a valve tick could turn into an engine replacement. We had old equipment, including lawnmowers, farm machinery, and trucks, but they all ran well despite their age because they were well maintained with that mentality. People with money simply take their vehicles to the mechanic for oil changes, brakes, and other maintenance without worrying about the cost. Story 20. I continue to turn off lights and keep the house much cooler or warmer in summer than my bank account now would suggest. Story 21. It taught me how to be resourceful with what I have, and it taught me a lot of character. With all the money wealthy people have, they cannot buy manners and understanding. Story 22. Navigating the map of public transportation options within a specific time frame to reach your destination and return. Story 23. Being afraid to want something. Note: my family was not poor in the sense that we had enough to eat. We had a working car in good repair and clothing that fit. Hand-me-downs and thrift store items were common. We had people around us who were a lot poorer. However, we were in a position where we had no extra money. My mother budgeted a fixed amount of money each year to keep the car running, and if we needed more, we had to find money elsewhere. My father was on a fixed income from being shot at a traffic stop. My mother was a college professor, so the income was good. But my mother was also sick my entire life. Lupus is a difficult disease. If my mother needed to do anything other than what she planned, she physically paid for it. By the time I was 6, I knew that if anything was not planned for, I could ask for it and get it, but I would have to listen to my mother crying in pain as a result. This made it so that I would not ask for anything that I did not absolutely need. By the age of 6, this created a vicious feedback loop. I could not even voice a want because I asked for so little that if I said I wanted something, my mother would start planning the budget to get it for me. This went further as I got older. My father got worse, my mother got worse. By the time I was 12, my siblings were gone. I had to change colostomy bags for my father and do house repairs. If I didn't, we would have to pay for them, which would make my mother worse. By the time I was 13, my family was in notably better financial shape because I did everything without being asked. I even started gardening at 10, and by 13, a noteworthy percentage of our food budget came from half an acre of land. When I entered high school, I started studying and tested out to graduate at 15. I then got a job. I have friends who were poorer than me who tell me they were horrified by my childhood. I cannot explain to some people the concept of being afraid to want something. Story 24. Homemade clothing. Man, I hated Joann Fabrics as a kid because it meant my mom was going to make me some ridiculous clothing that would get me laughed at on Monday at school. Story 25. I grew up when the middle class still existed, although I am sure we were poorer than I realized. Now I am 30 years old. I have been homeless and still struggle, but I have climbed back to a respectable job. I think the biggest thing that I or others took for granted is the safety net, the savings account. Poor people barely make it from month to month, much less have extra for problems and accidents they cannot predict. Story 26. Even if you can afford it, you put it off because you are worried you will need the money for an actual emergency. Story 27. They will never understand the embarrassment and shame of asking others for basic necessities, such as food and clothing, especially as a child when you have no control over your situation. The way you are scorned and treated like a diseased animal when all you want is clean underwear or socks to wear with your shoes. I did not care about never having holidays as a kid or the hot water and electricity getting cut off. That stuff did not really affect me. But it was the humiliation from others, especially adults and teachers, for having to ask for a sandwich or an apple because I had not eaten all day. Story 28. There is a reason we have social safety nets because not every child's poverty is controllable. However, there is an astounding belief that everyone is lazy and taking advantage of the system. Some also think that absolutely everyone can afford to travel, but almost everyone who says that is standing on some form of privilege. Story 29. It's the hardest discussion to have with people who are not poor. Going to Applebee's was like a ticket to Willy Wonka's factory. Haircuts by grandma were regular, and a Walmart haircut was considered top class. You would drink Gatorade in Walmart and hide the empty bottle afterward to avoid paying for it because you didn't have money. We would use our Christmas money to get gifts for others. You learned not to buy things you enjoy because you have bills, and you'll only use it once. Story 30. No matter how hard I save money, I will never move up the socioeconomic ladder without luck or befriending someone who is wealthy and well-connected. Even a college degree, if I accumulate debt for it, is worthless without the network that wealthy people have access to. The chances of befriending someone who is wealthy, even if I come close to them, are unlikely because I am honest, and they guard their trade secrets with their lives and legal counsel. We do not get along, and they blame me first. Story 31. I could never get my friends who were wealthy growing up to understand that I didn't ask my parents for things because I already knew they couldn't afford them. They would always say, "It's just a couple $100. What's the big deal? Just have your parents get it." My dad had to borrow $50 from me last week. I had to pay for all my own expenses as soon as I got a job. I would watch them destroy cars like it was nothing and just have their parents get them new ones. It blew my mind. Story 32. Wealthy children rarely understand how much they have and how much it will benefit them in their overall life. Even middle-class children do not realize how far ahead they are compared to children from low-income families. Story 33. What it is like to have to learn how to work with nothing or improvise. To not know about new technologies or trends and be left behind. To be the child who goes to the Boys and Girls Club and not just a volunteer. To know what it is like to use a t-shirt as a blanket. To sleep on the floor instead of a bed, and not for fun. To not be able to go on vacations. Story 34. Value, the worth of what you have, the importance of a dollar, the significance of being frugal, and the value of your friends and family. Learning that less can be more. Story 35. I came from a middle-class background, but I made it hard on myself during my college years. I was stubborn and didn't want to ask for help. I cannot properly explain how quickly you can forget any type of struggle once you can afford things. For someone who never struggled, never experienced it, never breathed it, and never had to sit in it, they do not have a clue. It will humble you. Story 36. The panic you feel when you break something or lose money. Young me was always so stressed about money. Story 37. Having a decent meal is a privilege. Eating bologna fried with eggs and sandwiches, macaroni with canned tomatoes and fried onions, cabbage, cheap sausage, and liver and onions was the cheapest meat you could buy. The funny thing is, I still love those meals today. Story 38. Cooking. When all you can afford is a bag of rice, a bag of potatoes, a bag of onions, and dried beans for a month, you learn how to make that food taste good. I learned when I was a kid because my mother worked and it had to be ready when she came home. This is a great memory for me. I am grateful for the experience. Story 39. How to be poor. You have to tell yourself no, use what you have for as long as possible, fix anything that can be fixed, and accept being uncomfortable. I honestly do not know how people who cannot accept being uncomfortable live. Life is often uncomfortable. Story 40. The difference between choosing not to eat and not being able to afford to feed yourself or a loved one. I grew up poor, not homeless, but enough that utilities would be cut off every now and then, and my parents sometimes had to take us to relatives so we would not go hungry. I had a friend in high school who I am still good friends with today. He grew up well off, upper middle class. His family was not elitist, but he only ever knew that lifestyle and only knew people who lived in that world. He is an extremely open-minded and smart guy, but one thing that opened my eyes to the difference between experiencing something and knowing of it was our discussion about what we might do with our lives after college. He started talking about being an artist, and I mentioned that it does not make a lot of money. How would he support himself? He said he did not mind being a starving artist. He wanted to make art and could live simply or go hungry if needed to make it happen. I had to stop him and tell him the truth that I had never really brought up about myself and my upbringing not being so stable. I had to explain the deep psychological weight that comes with not knowing when or if your next meal would be coming. Choosing to skip a meal to save money for a passion project is not even close to the same feeling as actually facing hunger you cannot make go away. The song Common People by Pulp does a good job explaining this concept. Rich people playing at being poor to get the real experience will never truly live it. You simply cannot fathom the despair and desperation of poverty, especially when you can call your family to bail you out. Story 41. My wife grew up quite poor. She has always maintained that the gap between having no money and having a little money is vastly greater than the gap between having a little money and having a lot of money. Story 42. Poor people give more of what they have than rich people. When rich people gave me things, it felt like crumbs to them. A friend gave me a VHS tape because when we were looking for something to watch, we saw he had 2 copies he didn't even know about. When I gave my copy of a Sega Genesis game I had beaten to a poorer friend, it still hurt because I knew I would never get to play it again. Story 43. Grit, resilience, and determination in the face of real adversity. I have seen wealthy young people have mental breakdowns when faced with an actual challenge. Story 44. How good some inexpensive foods are. My mom and grandma passed down some amazing recipes that are very cheap to make. I never got married or had children, and I have a good job, so I can afford whatever foods I want and still eat the dishes they taught me to make as part of my rotation because they are so delicious. Story 45. Not choosing what to eat, you eat whatever is in your school lunch no matter how unpleasant you think it is. Warm yogurt and creamed peas on toast is inexpensive. When you have to put items back from your grocery cart. When none of your hobbies or interests can involve spending money. Video games, no. Sports, no. Library books, yes. Story 46. They do not understand why choosing what to eat feels like a financial mistake they will not recover from. They have never had $100 in their account that needs to last until Friday, and tonight's restaurant bill must remain below $40. Story 47. How hard it is to find a job that does not pay well and treats you poorly. If you are poor, you are most likely to have worked at a place that made you feel unappreciated and paid you poorly. Story 48. Having parents who are willing to provide for you is not a given. My parents were able but not willing. Story 49. The couple $1,000s they use on a summer wardrobe would be transformationally life-changing to the majority of the country. Story 50. Sometimes not getting what you want works out better in the long run. The more money and possessions you have, the more fake friends you will attract. Your real friends are the ones who do not care if you have money or possessions, and no amount of disposable income is going to change that. Story 51. The relief of having a decent job with enough money in my bank account so that if my fridge breaks, I can fix it or even get a new one. Car has a flat tire, I can get a new tire. I have been in situations before where I hoped the fix a flat would work or I was in trouble. Just the relief of that money being there. It is not assigned for a bill or food. It is just there, just in case. Story 52. I've never been wealthy, so I don't know if wealthy children experience this, but do not waste anything. I cannot stand seeing full plates being thrown away or half-eaten bowls of cereal. In my house, as a child, you finished everything on your plate or bowl, and you did not donate anything unless you knew you absolutely were not going to wear or use it. Story 53. Just how lucky it is to eat all 3 meals. Even if you start earning more money, if you care about your immediate family, you might still be poor even if your paycheck says otherwise. Story 54. What powdered milk tastes like, which leads to making choices in life so that you never need to taste it again. Story 55. Those who cannot give you the best things actually want you to have them more than anybody else in the world. Story 56. Secondhand furniture and cars are just as great as brand new ones. When my husband and I moved in together into our apartment, we got our couch, coffee table, and recliner secondhand from his aunt and a friend's cousin. The dining set is secondhand as well. The only new furniture we got was our bed and bed frame. Story 57. While it is true that poverty causes some people to exhibit negative behaviors such as stealing and resource guarding, most poor people are remarkably generous, especially compared to wealthy individuals. Story 58. The mental math of constantly weighing needs versus wants becomes second nature when every dollar counts. Wealthy children will never understand why we treat a bent butter knife like a multi-tool. That is just survival mode creativity. It is remarkable how the word no feels different when it brings actual consequences, not just disappointment. Story 59. Always feeling like you are on the outside looking in. The social ease with which people moved through their lives, not standing out simply by having clean clothes, a neat haircut, and nice shoes. Story 60. It has taught me how to do things on my own, for example, basic cooking, cleaning, and fixing things around the house. Being poor, we could not hire people to do things for us. We had to do it ourselves and could not give up easily. Also, I learned where to get things cheaply and how to save money. Story 61. When you have a choice between damaging objects and damaging yourself, choose yourself because you heal and objects do not. When you reach the point of thinking, I would rather repair or replace objects than pay a medical bill or heal, and you realize, cool, I can afford that. Story 62. The ability to learn quickly. Car broke down. Learn how to fix it. Need a new chicken shit? You are a carpenter today. Sink pipe needs replacement? Take a trip to the local hardware store and figure it out. This gives you about 30 years of experience before you start your first job at 15. Story 63. I have a friend who grew up in a small original house in the town around 1999. We had another friend, whom we will call Kate, who grew up in a big house on the backside of town in a wealthier neighborhood. The first time Kate visited the small house of another friend, she exclaimed, "You live here? This is your house." We all looked at her with mouths agape and said, "You cannot say that. It is incredibly rude." She had no clue. Story 64. Some people think hungry means it is 4 p.m. and they have not eaten all day. That is not the hunger I know. Story 65. How expensive cheap items can become. We got a backpack to start the school year, and we needed a new one every year because we had to stitch and fix them by spring break. My mom never understood that a quality backpack could last multiple school years. Finally, in high school, I bought one good one with my own money after working all summer. Magically, it lasted through college. But you must have abused those others, my mom said. No, I treated everything the same. In fact, this backpack went with me to Europe twice and still survived. Story 66. I didn't necessarily grow up poor. We were lower middle class when I was a kid, but we have more money now than we did then. I have a younger sibling with a large age gap, so she didn't have the same experience growing up. She is used to our family not having to worry about money as much as I was. I am still programmed to ask if we can get something before I put it in the cart, even if it only costs $1. Meanwhile, my little sister just throws things in carelessly. It is not just simple stuff like that. I can tell that she does not have much understanding about how money works. She is 12 now. She does not really think about the things she does. She can be very wasteful of food and supplies, throwing away an entire meal that she does not like and trashing a whole notebook just because some pages had writing in them. I try to talk to her about these things, but she always brushes it off. I hope that when she gets older, perhaps gets a job, and has some of her own money, she will understand more. Story 67. I wasn't poor at all, but my mother was and still is extremely humble. Around middle school age, 12 to 13, I asked my mom, "Are we rich?" She just laughed and said, "No, but we're rich with love." Even though I didn't grow up poor, that means a lot to me. At the time, I was of course like, "Oh, whatever." But now, almost 20 years later, I still think about that a lot. Story 68. Put one thing in one hand and want in the other, and see which fills up first. At least, that is what my father told me all the time. Lesson. If you want things, you better learn how to pay for them, or you will be left with nothing. Story 69. When there is no more money, that means there is no more money, not that I should stop spending so much this month. Story 70. Carrying the weight of every adult problem and worrying about all the what-ifs because there is no money if anything bad happens. The insecurity of having a roof over your head and then worrying about your siblings and parents. The torment and shame of having dirty or old clothes and feeling embarrassed. It gets worse as you get older because you constantly worry about what your parents will do. Story 71. If you kept running in and out of the house and letting all the good air out, you were probably going to have problems money could not solve. Story 72. I once was talking to a girl in Switzerland. She grew up rich and I grew up in a small province of a developing country. She casually asked me to go on a trip to Tanzania. It doesn't cost much, only 2,000 euros, she said. I thought, no way. We're friends somehow, but sometimes we find things that are hard to relate to. I told her how we experienced hunger because our parents didn't have money to buy food. She said she experienced hunger too. She starved herself because of anorexia. I thought those are like comparing apples to oranges. To answer the original poster's question, it's the availability of resources. Wealthy people will assume everyone has enough resources as they do. They seem out of touch with developing world problems. Story 73. We got new shoes for school and a second pair only when the first pair wore out. I still do not see a need to buy shoes for an outfit. I have a few in my rotation that blend with most of my wardrobe. I save a lot on shoes. Story 74. As my wife reminded me, a little home surgery is necessary because urgent care costs money and you do not have insurance. Story 75. We wanted the same things as any other kid. When asked by a friend why I did not get an allowance, my dad replied that I had a warm place to sleep and food. That was all I got. I started working at 13 as a caddy. Then at 14, I had a full-time summer job. Even while working, I had chores at home. Lawn, leaves, snow, garbage. When I got a job across town, I had to give gas money to get there every week. We were taught that nothing is free. You work for it and it means more to you. I bought my own car at 16. I paid the insurance and gas. I never asked my parents for anything but a signature on my enlistment papers. Story 76. Staying humble when you achieve something grounds you. It helps you understand that what you have, you can lose, and it also brings the satisfaction of climbing the ladder of success. Story 77. Life is not fair. Santa loves wealthy children more than he loves poor children. No matter how good you are, unless your parents make a lot of money, you probably will not drive to Florida for spring break. Story 78. It taught me that people who have been wealthy since childhood do not understand what it is like to lack money and cannot comprehend the associated problems or the stress it causes. Story 79. The experience of knowing that I needed something like new shoes, but my parents could not afford them, so I would go without rather than stress them. Every middle-class or wealthy child, if they needed something and really needed it, their parents could just get it for them with no issues. The internalization of the poor mindset to simply go without is something they could never understand. Story 80. I was never poor, but money was tight for a long time. I would say, learn to spend only what you can afford. Feed yourself for 40 pounds a week. Value experiences over possessions. Avoid credit cards like the plague. Yes, I know they are useful, and I know you need to build your credit score, but I am so used to not having one that it is hard to be bothered to get one now. Story 81. Expiration dates are a suggestion and creative ways to make baked chicken feed a family for a week. Story 82. The amount of money in your bank account does not correlate to how good of a person you are. It simply reflects the opportunities you have been fortunate enough to receive. Story 83. How being wealthy gives you opportunities you do not even think twice about, which poor people aspire to achieve their whole lives. Story 84. Do things yourself instead of paying someone. Also, repair things yourself instead of buying new ones. Most importantly, be happy with what you have and do not want the newest thing every year. Story 85. A healthy lifestyle is expensive. Yes, I would love organically grown, locally sourced food, home cooked in my small kitchen. I would love to hit the gym and just go for a walk. What I can afford is a Costco macaroni and cheese TV dinner as I put the kids to bed after the third 16-hour shift that week before falling asleep in front of the television. Story 86. When I was growing up, most of the items we bought were put on layaway. For those who don't know, you set aside merchandise at the back of the store and pay a certain amount of money to help pay it off. When you grow up with little money, you tend to value your items more. You also become more handy and learn to fix things so the item's use can be extended. Most of your items will be bought at garage sales. Any clothes you have will be sewn or patched. Many of my stuffed animals came from garage sales or were thrown away by other kids. I adopted those stuffed animals, had them cleaned, and kept them for myself. Story 87. That more expensive does not mean better or higher quality. You can live your entire life purchasing all you need from Walmart and save an incredible amount of money compared to having sneakers with someone else's name on them. Story 88. For any sport or hobby, you always start with the lowest quality supplies or equipment. Only if you have talent and make the team with those will you have a chance to use the equipment that wealthier kids use. For example, a $20 Walmart tennis racket versus a $100 high-end racket. 1 can of tennis balls to practice with versus an entire basket. Street shoes versus dedicated basketball sneakers, and so on. Story 89. I grew up comfortably middle class, but my parents were abusive and resented being parents. When I was kicked out of home at 18, I did not speak to them again for nearly 10 years. Because I did not want contact, I had no safety net. I became acquainted with poverty. These experiences helped foster qualities like empathy, compassion, understanding, and gratitude, and they obliterated my sense of entitlement. Story 90. I learned that other people who are also poor or have very little will be the first ones to help you, giving you their last if necessary. Story 91. It made me realize I can be happy with very little. I do not need all of the luxuries that some people think they need. I do not need an expensive car. I just need one that is paid off. I can get me from point A to point B. I do not need a mansion. I just need peace in my home. There really are some things money cannot buy. Story 92. To just survive any way you can. I work with people who did not understand what rob Peter to pay Paul meant. Figuring out which bill can be postponed, which bill can be paid partially, and who will grant an extension. How to make $50 last 2 weeks, and so on. Story 93. Poor kids do not have the resources to compete with rich kids, no matter how fair policies seem to be. After graduating, a classmate with similar grades asked why I could not find a job. I asked how she found hers out of curiosity. She said her father knew someone high up in her company. She asked if I had asked my parents for help. My immigrant parents could only pray for me. In the real world, that does not count for much. Story 94. Your early difficult jobs help you socialize and build character. They are good for you. Being humbled is healthy for your future growth. Story 95. Passed down from my dad was how to increase an electric meter to full using a butter knife, while simultaneously opening the lock for all the 10-pence coins inside. It is a useless skill now, and I am glad I did not have to pass it down to my child. Story 96. Making do with what you have. If it is not broken, still works, and does not need to be replaced, just use it. Not having a high consumption lifestyle will pay you big dividends. The people who look like they have a lot of money do not, because they spend all their money to look like they have a lot of money. Story 97. It taught me to be grateful for the things I have and not want frivolous things. It also taught me that when you win, your people win. Taught me how to fix, build, and do just about anything with my hands. Story 98. Parents really can do their best to prevent their children from experiencing stress. I have 2 siblings with special needs and lived in California for the first half of my life. My family was very poor. I did not realize this until I was about 14 or 15 years old, when we lived in another state and were doing well financially. The stress of being poor is definitely not easy to manage. However, my parents did a great job ensuring my siblings, and I never knew or had to worry about it. This did not mean that my parents said yes to everything we asked for, but they never took out their stress on us or involved us in difficult situations. I am extremely grateful for that. Story 99. Preferring cheap off-brand products over expensive brand name ones, even when financially I am okay. I don't know, man. Being poor has made me realize that in a lifetime, a certain amount of money can be earned. It should not be wasted on things I don't need. Story 100. Money amplifies who you are when you obtain it. If you are a nerd or a jerk with a Lamborghini, most smart women still will not give you their time because they know they could find another person with the same qualities who stands for what they like before the money is even presented. A true example is when Malone did that elite Bitcoin heist and tried impressing his crush. I respect his hunger to get rich, but he should have approached life afterward differently in many ways. Story 101. The comfort of knowing that even if I return to my parents' income level, I understand what it looks like and we will probably be okay. Also, how to sneak into events. Story 102. Choosing between essential needs. Will I be able to eat enough this month, or will I be able to pay rent? Story 103. My grandmother did not have electricity or running water in her house. Most people in the United States of America have no concept of poverty. Story 104. I cannot summarize a lesson from this, but I attended an upper-middle-class school while living in the lowest-class area of East Africa and never felt any less. Story 105. How to fend for themselves. How to do the basics, take care of yourself and know how to take care of yourself. Clean the place, learn how to cook, and improve at anything you try to do. Patience, observation, and knowing what is needed to help each other. Empathize. Just be yourself because it is okay. Story 106. They do not understand what it is like to have never had the experience of XYZ growing up, for example, going on vacation. Story 107. Growing up poor in California, I often had to pick my own avocados, grapefruit, oranges, and pomegranates from trees in the neighborhood. Story 108. How to fix problems on your own and how to finance repairs when you cannot. My laptop just broke, and I confirmed I cannot fix it myself because I need to replace the charging port and I cannot solder. When I take it in for repair, I can cut out at least 3 hours of diagnosis by informing them exactly what needs to be fixed so they can replace the faulty part. Story 109. They will never understand what "I can't get that" means or feel another's pain as you do. However, life without sadness gives you a shallow soul. It is important to experience sadness to complete your human self and gain psychological depth, but too much of it is harmful. Story 110. God has decided what money we are going to make in this life, but God gave the choice, the good way or the bad way. Story 111. How to deal with being cold, wet, hungry, and tired, sometimes all at the same time. You cannot fathom the perseverance and willpower that poverty can teach you. Story 112. People assume that growing up rich will grant you everything. It is not that obvious. All of the basic necessities will be met: shelter, food, education, healthcare, and so on. But do not expect to always have the latest toys. Some parents are just very frugal and financially responsible. They invest half of their money. I lived a very sheltered life and can say that I lacked every imaginable soft skill after graduating. Children with more modest backgrounds had an easier time integrating into the workforce. Story 113. I grew up middle class in rural farm country in the 1970s. There was no internet and no cell phones. If I was bored, I had to create my own fun. In the summer, I rode my bike for miles and enjoyed being on my own with the wind on my face. I went fishing, climbed trees, and did a paper route. In winter, I played games with my brother, did art projects, shoveled snow, and continued the paper route. We did not have a lot, but I had fun. Story 114. That you do not need anything else except for paid bills, health, and loved ones. Everything else is a bonus. Story 115. There is a whole song that answers your question. Common people. Nothing to add or remove from the lyrics. William Shatner and Joe Jackson's version is my favorite, of course. Story 116. I know it was not good that it happened, but when I was in the 6th grade, there was a kid whose parents had a lot of money. This kid kept picking on me for no reason and continued the whole year. One day, I finally got tired of it and punched him in the face. Started a small fight, but I immediately realized this kid had no idea what to do. He kept looking to his friends for help, but there was none. I had only been in a few schoolyard scraps before that point, but I will never forget the look on this kid's face when he lost. The mix of embarrassment and fear actually made me feel bad for him. I planned to apologize the next year, but he switched schools in a different district. I have not thought about that in almost 25 years. Story 117. My mom went through a phase of cutting mine and my brother's hair to save money, as we didn't have any. She had taken 3 to 4 night classes for hairdressing at my local school and felt it was enough training. It wasn't. She was even worse at making clothes. I had a pair of black school trousers that were of differing widths down the leg, not just between left and right, but within each trouser leg. The material was made of some man-made fabric that became shiny on the first day and produced enough static to make your hair stand on end. On top of that, at 13, I had a Joanna Lumley Purdy haircut. I was awkward anyway, and at a time when I was starting to worry about my appearance and appeal to girls, I was getting laughed at by kids in brand new clothes with the required shoes they had. I don't know how I got a girlfriend before I was 16, to be honest. Story 118. Patience. Having to make do with something, often clothes, that barely still functions until your parents' payday to replace it, rather than throwing an item away that is just a few days old and getting brand new because you did not like the last one anymore. Story 119. The value of food. Even though I now make enough money that I do not have to worry about food cost while shopping, I still will not buy foods that I deem too expensive for the amount of product offered. Shrinkflation has been extremely difficult for me. Story 120. Enjoying brand name food. Even now, the idea of eating Kellogg's cornflakes or Walker's crisps seems like an outrageous indulgence. Story 121. I work at a very money-focused college campus, and I have realized that growing up poor taught me how to wash clothes, wash dishes, share things, and take care of things like a bathroom. Growing up poor taught me not to throw my sweet and sour chicken on the floor and leave it there for days. Growing up poor taught me not to throw everything into the kitchen sink. Story 122. Lemon juice, salt, and bicarbonate of soda are a great surface cleaner. But it will scratch the surfaces. My surfaces are cheap wood installed by a cheaper landlord. Story 123. I will never understand how no wealthy child knows how to repair a car. They just call their father and he either fixes it or buys a new one. Story 124. I'll drive 3 miles out of my way home to get to the gas station that is notoriously cheaper than the others in the area. Instead of $2.98 per gallon, I pay $2.96 per gallon. Fake numbers. In the end, I lost money since I drove further to save about 20 cents, but in my mind, I've won. That, folks, is how I explained it to my wealthy friend who still does not understand why I do this, even though I know I am losing out. So, true to the title, my wealthy friend will never understand because I don't either. Story 125. Saying that you will do it when you know you cannot do it, but you do it anyway for the sake of the family. Story 126. Fixing things before they are thrown away. For instance, my mom is fixing one of my favorite shirts that has a hole in it. Normally, wealthy people would throw it away, but she is going to mend it, and I will have a cool patch on my shirt. Story 127. There is always a difference in expectations. Whether it be activities, meals, style, or shopping, being able to do more creates a different baseline for how you expect life to work for everyone. Wealthy friends or former partners always picked options that cost more money because it was more fun and enjoyable, and there was no barrier preventing their entry. Poor and middle-class friends more frequently made plans based on what they already had to save as much money as possible. Story 128. Sausages do not taste great, but you can relieve hunger pains with just 2 to 3 of those little dog treats. Story 129. Just because you are working hard does not mean you will have a great life or that people will applaud your effort. It will provide you with the bare minimum food on the table, the option to take risky opportunities, and the mindset that even if you fail, you will find a way out of the mess because nobody else will do that for you. Do your own research. There are many things that children from wealthy families are taught, sometimes as simple as how to apply for opportunities so you have money to pursue your goals. You have the same options as everyone else, but you might not know that they exist. Story 130. Having to earn things. For me, getting a car was a multi-year saving endeavor. For my best friend, it was a 16th birthday present. Story 131. How hard it is to break the poverty mindset. I have not been poor for a long time, and I still have a hard time saving for retirement or avoiding justifying unnecessary purchases because I can afford them now. I am pretty sure I will be poor again tomorrow. Story 132. Having to worry about transferring away from a school you love just to save money actually happened to me. Story 133. Growing up poor taught me how to do a full load of washing in the bath, and not just do it but optimize it. I have at least 3 methods for getting water out of clothes: the tap, wrap, and twist, the overhead spin, and the squeeze and spank. Poverty is the ant to all invention. Story 134. That $20 is not pocket money. It is the exact distance between hunger and fullness. It is the sound of the lights staying on. It is a math problem where want never varies. Story 135. The painful feeling of having to go to the automobile repair shop for almost everything because you know it will be expensive regardless. Story 136. The satisfaction of working toward a frivolous purchase and achieving it. The guilt is there, but you deserve it and earned it. Story 137. Oh, and being food poor, knowing we paid the electricity bill and wouldn't eat dinner. Literally a quart of milk and a can of soup. Story 138. Freedom is not a privilege people are born with. It is bought with money. The more money you earn, the more freedom you can buy. Work less, spend less time on chores, buy whatever you desire, go wherever you want and whenever you want. Story 139. Valuing what you have, knowing how hard you had to work or how long you had to wait to finally get it. Story 140. No one was able to help you get out of debt. No lending from parents to make rent. No spare vehicle to borrow while yours was down. Needing to save your own money to buy a $600 beater. When you did not get to pick your clothes for the new school year. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.